What will the world look like in 5 years? How about 15 years? How about 30? How will we educate when programming has become the first international language? How will we travel when we don't need to know the way? How will we heal when new organs can be printed on site? How will we work when our job is a thing of the past? How will we interact when virtual reality becomes the new reality? These are the questions that will shape our world, our governments, our families, our future. Introducing the World Government Summit, an international world-class event bringing together 3,000 world leaders from over 100 countries. Innovative perspectives on 50 of the future's most pressing questions in healthcare, education, technology, cities, and society. Asking tomorrow's questions today. Join the conversation. World Government Summit, shaping future government.
Will pullulate with sensors, all joined together by the Internet of Things, and the urban environment is as antiseptic as a Zurich pharmacy. But this technology could also be used to keep every citizen under round-the-clock surveillance. A future Alexa will pretend to take orders, but this Alexa will be watching you, clucking her tongue and stamping her foot. In future, voice connectivity will be in every room and almost every object. Your mattress will monitor your nightmares, your fridge will beep for more cheese, your front door will sweep wide the moment you approach like some silent butler. Your smart meter will go hustling of its own accord for the cheapest electricity, and every one of them minutely transcribing your every habit in tiny electronic shorthand, stored not in their chips or in their innards, nowhere you can find it, but in some great cloud of data that lowers ever more oppressively over the human race. AI. What will it mean? Helpful robots washing and caring for an aging population, or pink-eyed terminators sent back from the future to cull the human race?
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to participate for the 8th time at this important meeting, even if only in a virtual way. I would like to express my high respect to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum for having taken the initiative for creating such an important global platform for governments shaping the future. I also want to congratulate Dubai for having organized such a successful World Expo despite all the repercussions of the global pandemic. Last November, in partnership with His Excellency Mohammed Al Gargawi, we brought together 60 top intellectual thinkers here in Dubai. Thank you to His Excellency for enabling this initiative to define a longer-term narrative to make the world more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable. With all the current issues on our agenda, we tend to forget that we are in the midst of the 4th industrial revolution, which accelerates global change in much more comprehensive and faster ways than the previous 3 revolutions. I'm proud that the government of Dubai has been so foresighted in establishing a Center for the 4th Industrial Revolution in cooperation with the World Economic Forum. The objective is to quickly recognize the potential of new technologies, as well as develop the necessary ethical and political frameworks around those new technologies to ensure that those technologies are human-centered and society-oriented. The world has to overcome not only the damage done to our economies and our societies by COVID-19, it also has to confront the repercussions of a dangerous clash between major global powers. History is truly at a turning point. We do not yet know the full extent and the systemic and structural changes which will happen. However, we do know that global energy systems, food systems and supply chains will be deeply affected. In times of crisis, the role of governments is more important and more relevant than ever. What is also needed is a summit like this one to go beyond crisis management and to look into constructive ways we can build our common future. Our futures are intrinsically connected to one another, as the profound challenges to mankind, such as climate change, are globally interconnected and require collaborative responses. In conclusion, and despite all the challenges, we have to uphold our responsibility, which we have towards the next generation, and which we can only fulfill through collaboration on a national and on a global level.
Now they're working on a treaty of which we will see the first draft on August 1st of this year, which is called the World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty, which, as you said rightfully, will be a legally binding treaty for practically every single nation on the earth. So once a new pandemic hits, and those are their words, not mine, we will have a united response to how to deal with the pandemic, meaning that there will be this organization that is not democratically elected, that we didn't vote for. We don't even know exactly who is in it or who we can hold accountable for the things that they will impose on us, is going to basically create laws that will decide how our respective nations are going to respond to a new crisis, a new pandemic. So this is huge news and it's very dangerous, but as indeed, we're not hearing anything about it.
No, and as you say, I don't know if you object to it. I don't know where you go to. What polling station do you go to vote out Dr. Tedros? There isn't one anywhere on the planet. And all it ensures is that their disastrous performance during the last 2 years, I mean, basically they've been in the pocket of China. That's why this is the first pandemic where 2 years have gone by and we don't have a reliable answer on where it came from or how it got out. Basically, the guys who are in the pocket from China are now going to be running pandemic policy for North America, Europe, Australia and everywhere else.
Exactly. We didn't vote for them, and you said it rightfully so. They are completely in the pocket of China. It was the World Health Organization that, first of all, praised China for their response to the pandemic, which we all know what the response is. We've seen actually the footage of how China is still responding to the pandemic, and we see people screaming and jumping out of buildings because of the draconic lockdowns that they're still having there. That was China's response. That's what the World Health Organization was praising. The other thing is an interview that we've seen with an official from the World Health Organization that has responded very vaguely to whether Taiwan had a good response to the pandemic, because obviously Taiwan is not something that you want to talk about if you're in China's pockets. And what they've also done is they have very much so, they've told China that they can do the research for the origin of the virus. So yeah, is China going to incriminate themselves? I don't think so. So the ties with China are very clear. Lockdowns will definitely probably be something that we can see in this treaty as one of the responses, of course, to the new pandemic. It's almost like the holy trinity of the world governments is a lockdown, vaccine, and surveillance app. And well, the EU being a very big partner in this new treaty, the European Commission is a partner to draft this new treaty. Wants a digital ID, as we've talked about. So we can be sure that that's something that's going to be in there under the guise of data sharing. And then another interesting element to all of this is that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is the largest financial donor to the World Health Organization. So we see three major stakeholders here that I don't want ruling my life, but they will be doing exactly that, and they will have the legal powers to do it without us being able to say, hey, we don't want this we're going to vote you out, because we can't vote them out. So we can't hold them accountable for the things that they will impose on us. And I don't think it's going to be any fun.
No, and I have no idea why Bill Gates gets a bigger say than millions and millions of people in supposedly free societies. I don't know why Bill Gates is suddenly the big expert on viruses. When he ran Microsoft, he couldn't keep viruses out of Windows 98, but he's now the biggest genius on the planet when it comes to keeping viruses out of real life. This is a terrible thing. You know, one thing I've learned, Ava, from the last couple of years is that I like borders because borders give you choices. That if you're an American, for example, and you don't like the crazy lockdown policy in California, you can go to Florida. Even within the EU, even within Scandinavia, if you don't like what they're doing in Denmark, you can go to Sweden, where they had a completely different approach. And I would think that in the next and that's even true between England and Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, which were all much heavier-handed lockdowns. I would love it if the next time one of these things is unleashed by China, we actually had more choices in the approach to dealing with it, rather than a one-size-fits-all thing for the entire planet.
Right. And this is why we are so afraid, and why a lot of conservatives always warn for globalism, why they warn for the idea of world governance, of a world government. That's not a conspiracy theory anymore, when there is literally a world organization that is going to be able to draft laws in the moment of a crisis, in the moment of a pandemic. I don't know what could be more opposed, diametrically opposed to the idea of democracy, than not having a people vote for representatives within their nation state that are there to put forward their interests. Now we are giving that sovereignty away to an organization that is going to do that on a worldwide scale. You can't have both. It's either democracy or a world government or a world organization dealing with these things for us. You can't have them all.
Yeah, that's very well put, Ava. I wonder, do you think, when you look at all these trends, the digital identity, the WHO globalization of public health, when you put them all together, do you think we are actually moving into a post-democratic era?
We're already moving into it right now. Basically, we've already seen what it's like during COVID. We didn't have anything to say. It was all by executive rule. And in that case, it was from our governments. But now we're moving towards something that is so big that it's almost impossible to end this, it seems. Once you start looking into this, as we just said, the EU is in it. China is in it. Bill and Melinda Gates are in it. So you have big capital, you have the European Union, you have China. It is such a big play, and there are so many stakeholders that all seem to have the same interest, join up and decide these things for us. It's completely impossible by now to deny that there is something happening here that is going to definitely take away power from the people, and that it's going to go towards a surveillance society on a global scale. I really can't say that it's anything else. This is what it is.
No, you're absolutely right, and thank you for bringing up Bill Gates, because Bill Gates is one voter. He's no more important than you or anybody else, and it's outrageous that just because he got rich peddling that crappy product, that lousy computer system he makes, that he should suddenly be the public health commissar for the planet. Thank you very much, Ava. We're going to stay on top of this story. Like all the conspiracy theories of the last couple of years, it turns out to be completely real. Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, Justin Trudeau, they've all signed on to this thing. Thank you, Ava. Always good to see you. Let me know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can Twitter me at gbnews. We'll get to your reaction next. Plus, our continuing series on victims of the vaccine who have been totally screwed over by Her Majesty's government. We don't do Ginger Growler Gate here. We do stories that will impact your lives. So Labour members can...
Secretary General and Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, will witness the signing of a memorandum of understanding on a strategic partnership between the UN and the World Economic Forum, which outlines areas of cooperation to deepen engagement between the two institutions and to jointly accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. This afternoon, the Secretary General and Klaus Schwab, the founder.
Like me, you love to study the Bible, especially when it comes to intricacies related to biblical prophecy, God's timeline as to how the end of the world as we know it transitions with the rapture of the church, the beginning of the tribulation period, and things that happen beyond. Our guest, Dr. Mark Hitchcock, has written a marvelous book called Blood Moons Rising. It's available to you this month. This is our offer. I'll tell you how to get the book in a moment. Mark, I want to get right to this thing that we've been talking about with the Antichrist and the mark of the beast. One world government, one world economy. You write about this in your book. It's taught about in the Word of God, is it not?
It is, yeah. Revelation chapter 13 really is the entry point, I like to say, to this one world government, this one world economy that the Bible predicts. It says that one man is going to ultimately rule the world for the last 3.5 years of this current age. We can see how that can happen. I mean, people today are looking for someone with answers. You know, I like to go back to the time in Weimar Germany when the hyperinflation took place, and they were looking for someone to come and to bring some order from the chaos, and that's how they ended up with Adolf Hitler.
That's right.
And it's the same thing in our world today. As we see more economic chaos and nations in chaos, people are going to be looking for a savior and a deliverer.
And then the ability to, with exchange through the internet that you can purchase, and then the global aspect of our economy, our credit cards, online banking, yes. It all just seems to fit into the biblical narrative of the ancients, this modern technology.
It does, and the Bible never tells us this end-time economy will be cashless, but I believe it has to be in order to control it, because as long as there's money, you can buy on the black market and kind of get around the system. But you can't buy or sell, the Bible says, unless you have this mark of the beast, this identifying mark of the Antichrist. And to me, the only way for that to happen is it's all got to be under his control. And we see today how that could happen with all the electronic technology there is, how you could control every transaction in the world, and people can't buy or sell without this mark.
And again, electronic currency, an electronic global currency is not beyond the realm of possibility. And we saw in the European Union the combination of all these different countries that had their own unique currency folding into the euro, and now that's every day reported, its value reported right alongside the US dollar or the Japanese yen.
It is. But I think one thing that's very important to me in all of this to see is when people take this mark of the beast to be able to buy or sell, it's going to be really taking his name upon them. So it's really going to be a mark of their allegiance to him. And I think in that coming tribulation, unlike any other time, people are going to have a clear-cut choice. Are they going to take Christ, or are they going to follow the Antichrist? And that's what's coming in this world. It's a sobering thing to think about.
Is this intriguing or what? Fascinating stuff. You've got to get the book, Blood Moons Rising. Mark's done a great job putting the story together. We've been talking to you about these blood moons, which are signs of the time, we believe, that could point to the return of Jesus Christ, the rapture of the church. If you will call the number on the screen and tell our folks at Crossroads, hey, I want the book on the blood moons, they'll be able to tell you how to do that. And I want to ask you boldly, politely, but firmly and with conviction, when you request the book.
We're not talking about something that's entertaining or sensational. We're talking about your government, where you live, your country, your freedoms. Right. And what we're talking about here is things which you see every day. Like someone said a long time ago, many will look with their eyes but not see, and listen with their ears but not hear. And that's us. That is this country. We have been looking at things all along and never realizing the significance of the occult emblems that we're seeing today.
Europe, a new world order. International world order.
Novus Order Seclorum, a new order for the centuries, for the ages, forever.
And creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
I think a new world order is emerging.
New world order.
The opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world with the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
No conspiracy can deal with exposure. Once the truth is out and the people understand, then they have problems. And I'm saying that the power of any government is in people.
A new world order can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace. An era in which the nations of the world, East and West, North and South, can prosper and live in harmony.
If you understand that symbols and emblems and things that we see every day are like the letters of an alphabet, if you put them together, they tell a story. If you understand, wake up and understand that we are not in a benevolent government, that Plato said, the price good people pay for non-involvement in public affairs is to be ruled by evil men.
Graphic symbolism is as important in the 18th century as it is now in the 21st century. So there was a standardized visual language which stood across Europe and, of course, the United States.
At a time when many people couldn't read, this common visual language was taught through the use of emblem books.
Emblem books became standard pattern books for engravers, architects, engineers. So by the time you get to the early 18th century, Ripper's emblem book was the standard piece of design equipment that you'd find in any engraver's workshop.
That in the old Celtic Druid occultism of ancient England, from which we have gotten most, about 95% of our mysticism in America has come from the old ancient English Celtic magicians. We always see pictures of
we're talking about Stonehenge, right?
Yeah, Stonehenge, right. Merlin the magician with his magic wands, and all the magicians always have their magic wands. Magic wands were always made out of holly wood. And Hollywood has been used for many years to manipulate your thinking, to explain mystical subjects to you, and to prepare you to accept certain mystical premises. A classic example, and I'm not in any way belittling the work, but it's very important to understand Steven Spielberg and George Lucas's work with the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because you can't understand the Last Crusade if you don't understand the First Crusade. And if you understand that the Raiders of the Lost Ark, who was the Raiders of the Lost Ark fighting against? It was the Nazis. Interesting too, in the Star Wars, according to the Masonic reference works that you can get in any library, the Freemasonic orders of Europe said that there was a little ideologue, a little spiritual entity that gave the knowledge to what the Masons call our hidden masters. That's what Freemasonry refers to, those who lead world Freemasonry. They don't know who they are. No Freemason knows who the actual leaders of the world organization are. They call them our hidden masters. Well, according to the reference works, there is a little spiritual entity that guides the world Freemasonry, and they call him Yoda. And in the reference works, you'll see this little creature with the pointed ears, and he's called Yoda. Yoda goes back to Judah, or Judah, which goes back into British Israel World Freemasonry, going back to the time of the founding of England, and that's why they're today called British. The British, it's a very big difference between being English and British. Brit is Hebrew for a contract or a covenant, and ish means man in Hebrew. Therefore, British is the covenant man or man of the new covenant.
So we're talking about Star Wars.
So we're talking about Star Wars. We're talking about
the evil empire,
and the Empire
Yoda
Strikes Back. And with the Empire striking back, New York is the Empire State. We're talking about the new empire of New World, America, striking back at Europe in 2 world wars to overthrow the old Roman dynasties in Europe to take over the world. So what we're saying here is that there is a war going on between gangs to see who's going to ultimately be on the top of the pyramid.
After you have all the material things that you could possibly want in life, what is left to excite you? And for many people, the answer is power, global power. They became intellectually elite. They began to think that they had a plan that was better than anybody else's plan. They got the idea that freedom is dangerous. If you give people freedom, you know what? They're probably not going to use it wisely like we think they should. We are smarter than they are. And for their own good, we should rule them.
Yes, the obelisk, you'll see the Egyptian obelisk here. The Egyptian obelisk points up to the top of the triangle or the top of the pyramid. We're talking about occultic forces. We're talking about the five-pointed pentagram, which was used by satanic worshippers for thousands of years. If you take the 5 points off of a five-pointed star or a pentagram, you have left in the middle a pentagon. That's why the United States has a pentagon. The pentagon is directed toward the North Star because according to the ancient Babylonians, that's where you gathered power from the gods of the North in war. We're talking about sex, drugs, rock and roll, violence. We're talking about a concerted effort to manipulate the human beings of this country into a new order and a new world, and the people are going along with it, docile, and have not.
And it says Novus Ordo Seclorum. That's on. That's on
that really interests me. That the term seclorum. You said earlier that meant secular. Now, doesn't that secular really mean more than
Well, these people think of themselves as gods.
Well, but
these are the new gods.
But secular. If you ask a minister what secular means, he'll say the secular world and we Christians, meaning that it's a secular world without the God that created us. Isn't that true?
Yes.
So what we're looking at is a new God, a Luciferian God, a satanic God who will be the leader of the New World Order. So the New World Order is the New World Order without the old God of the Bible and with the new God, Lucifer, Satan.
Now, you take a look at the pentagram.
We want to bring out one point here in relation to what he says. We're not talking about an evil genius somewhere in Bavaria. We're talking about America. Here is the New World Order. We are in the middle of the most diabolical, conspiratorial movement ever developed on the face of the earth, right here in America.
The 33rd Degree Council that meets in Washington, D.C. claims in their own literature to be the mother jurisdiction of the world, the mother council of the world. Manly P. Hall called them the most powerful organization in the land, that they ordain kings and shape the destinies of worlds. That's called power.
In Africa, and the big game hunters in Africa for many years used to, when you go out to hunt the big game, you wouldn't go into the jungle to look for the big game. You would hire many of the natives to go out with cans and bottles and surround about a 10-mile circle out in front of you and work in, beating cans and bottles and screaming and frightening your prey, the lion or the animal that you're looking for, and he's your prey. And you keep closing in until finally whatever is out there comes out into the open and he's a sitting duck. That is precisely what has been happening for the last 100 years. The Illuminati have been purposely organizing, directing, and financing wars, revolutions, violence, and bloodshed, so that it will sufficiently impress and frighten the world of humanity into accepting a new order, a new police state that will finally put down all the law and the disorder in the world. And it is the oldest trick in the book. Our greatest enemy is not in a crack house, it's in the White House. It's not in a bar room, it's in the boardrooms. And so the point I'm making is that we are being manipulated from the very top. And we need to wake up and find out that America is not the land of the free and the home of the brave, because we're not free and we darn sure ain't brave.
Freemasonry is a secret organization that they claim is not secret but sacred. But it is secret. I can't go to their meetings, neither can you. Even the media can't go. So if they've got an evil purpose to change our civilization and we don't want to change it, they've got to conceal it.
Is going on in Geneva at the World Health Organization, and how do we get so far down the road of it looks like signing something that's going to expand the sovereignty, the ability of the World Health Organization in Geneva, controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, to affect the sovereignty of the United States of America?
That's right. It's hard to believe, Steve, but in less than 2 weeks' time, a vote will take place in Geneva, Switzerland at the World Health Assembly. They're important because they're the governing body of the World Health Organization, WHO. This authority that they would be given would impact 99.4% of all the people in the world. There are 193 nations belonging to the UN. The Biden administration is bringing amendments that would propose that all nations of the earth cede their sovereignty over national health care decisions to the WHO, the World Health Organization. So what this would mean, Steve, is that the WHO would have decision-making authority to intervene into the United States government policy and any nation of the world without our permission. So for instance, the lockdowns where you see 26 million people today locked down in Shanghai, China, they can't leave their apartments or homes, the WHO would have the authority to be able to impose that here in the United States for whatever pretext they want. They don't have to show data, they could do this. What this does, Steve, bottom line, is it creates a platform for global governance through the WHO. This is what people need to know. It's time sensitive. No one knew about this. The Biden administration gave these proposed amendments to the World Health Organization on January 18th. No one in America knew this until April 12th. Less than a month ago, the Biden administration posted these amendments. But in less than 2 weeks in Geneva, Switzerland, the delegates will vote on this. The Biden administration has already released a list of countries, 40 of the most powerful countries in the world, including Canada, including the EU, including the UK, including Australia. These countries are going along with the Biden administration's insane push to give sovereignty over the untrustworthy WHO. Again, this creates a platform for global governance. So it's extremely important. The vote is going to take place in less than 2 weeks. And no one effectively knows about this happening, but people are starting to know. So it's important now that we get to Kevin McCarthy, the leader in the House, Mitch McConnell, the leader in the Senate, and demand that they drop everything and have a joint press conference and say nothing is going to happen in the United States government until Joe Biden drops these amendments and agrees that we will not give a U.S. sovereignty away to the UN. This is the biggest global power grab that we have ever seen in our lifetimes. And if this goes through, nothing else matters, because the vote that takes place May 22nd through 28th in Geneva, Switzerland, goes into effect in November, which means it won't matter which party wins the elections in November, because global authority will have already transferred to the WHO. That's why this is so important, and it's why we have to get the U.S. Senate involved, the U.S. House involved, so they stop this dead in its tracks right now, or we lose authority here in the United States.
In this year's annual letter, Melinda and I take the toughest questions we get asked and give our answers. One that's come up for a long time is, as we make the world healthier, is the population going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible? Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. We go from less than 1 billion in 1800, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.4 billion where we are today is happening even faster. So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem? What we found out is that as health improves, families choose to have less children. And this effect is very, very dramatic. We find that in every country of the world, this is repeated. The population growth goes down as we improve health. So we've taken that chart that shows the global population growth, and we've actually extended it out all the way to 2100. And we can see that instead of continuing, it actually flattens out. Another way to see that is through this rate of population growth. And you can see that in the 60s, that reached a pretty high number, over 2% per year, and it's now come way, way down. Now, 11 billion people, still a lot, but the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down, and so we can feel great about saving those lives.
And welcome to our exclusive interview with Bill Gates, the entrepreneur, Microsoft co-founder, software developer, and philanthropist. Thanks for being here.
Great to talk to you.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's annual letter is now just come out. You both write about how this pandemic, in your view, will be as defining as World War II. What are the key steps to take right now?
Well, we have to do two things at once. We have to bring this epidemic to an end, primarily by getting the vaccine out in large numbers to the entire world. And we have to make sure that we're ready because there will be another pandemic. And there's so many lessons about how we weren't prepared, how we should have handled things differently. And, you know, when that's clearly in our mind, those investments need to be made.
You mentioned being ready for the next time, and you warned about this last time. Let's take a brief look at a 2015 warning you issued.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus. If we start now, we can be ready for the next epidemic.
How ready was the world for this, say on a scale of 1 to 10, and how about the U.S.?
The U.S. gets a low score because the understanding of how to get diagnostics up to scale early to stop the exponential spread, you know, if that had been done well, we would have been more like an Australia or a South Korea.
We, as a global community, will deal with the next pandemic better.
Well, you know, there were a lot of people in 2015 after the Ebola epidemic who were talking about what needed to be done. And in this pandemic, the countries that had some exposure to SARS-CoV-1 were amongst the outliers. You know, so Australia is a true outlier. They orchestrated diagnostics, they executed quarantine policies, and they have a death rate in a different league than the other rich countries. I mean, just utterly different. And everybody had the capability to do that. They, you know, have less PCR machines than other rich countries. It wasn't some thing. They had more travelers coming in from China than other countries. So hopefully, you know, given the so many negative things, not just the millions of deaths and the economic toll, but the lack of schooling, depression, overdose deaths. I mean, it's you know, hard to make the entire list. As you say, you know, for men, more men died. For women, more women had, you know, unacceptable burdens thrust onto them. So the cost of being ready for the next pandemic is not super large. It's not like climate change where, you know, 10 trillion, 20 trillion, these are big numbers. You know, a global surveillance capability would cost like $1 billion a year. The R&D that we need to do to get magic vaccines and diagnostics and therapeutics, you know, that's less than $100 billion over the next decade. So, you know, if we're rational, yes, the next time we'll catch it early, and it won't go global like it did this time.
There's a growth of the cases, so instead of decreasing or plateauing, which they had been, they're now actually starting to increase day over day. And we're certainly seeing a persistent high number of deaths, so 40 a day over the past 7-day average. So basically, we are at a point where COVID's now one of the major killers of Australians, and probably by the end of the year is going to be one of the top 3 killers of Australians. And with an increasing case numbers and with new subvariants coming in, this may drive it even further, which will have an even bigger impact.
But right now we have the highest infection rate in the world. That is a sobering statistic.
Absolutely sobering. I do think it needs to be taken into context. Many countries really are not still testing to the degree that Australia is, not recording rats testing. In fact, you look at a place like Denmark, they're actually recommending that people not test, that if you have symptoms of COVID, unless you're at higher risk of having complications and are eligible for treatment, that you don't even bother testing, let alone.
Continue to calibrate how we manage this virus and how we live with this virus in the face of Omicron. Of course that is necessary, but we're not going back to lockdowns. We're not going back to shutting down people's lives. We're going forward to live with this virus with common sense and responsibility. And there will be other variants beyond Omicron. And we have to ensure, as a country and as leaders around the country, we are putting in place measures that Australians can live with. And what that means is we have to move from a culture of mandates to a culture of responsibility. That's how we live with this virus into the future. We've got to get past the heavy hand of government, and we've got to treat Australians like adults.